The European Union, with its 28 member states, is by far Switzerland's most important trading partner. However, Switzerland is also important for the EU. Since the Free Trade Agreement of 1972, an increasingly dense network of treaties has been established with the EU. After the Swiss voted no to the European Economic Area, EEA, in 1992, Switzerland embarked on a bilateral path, allowing it to pursue a tailor-made policy with its European neighbours. The European Economic Community, EEC, experienced further strengthening through the approximation of the remaining states in the European Free Trade Association, EFTA, to which Switzerland also belongs. Federal Councillor Ernst Brugger and Swiss EEC envoy Paul Jollers signed the EEC Free Trade Agreement in Brussels on July the 22nd. The 1972 Free Trade Agreement is the oldest treaty between Switzerland and the European Union, or rather its predecessor, the European Economic Community. It created a free trade zone for industrial goods and regulated trade with processed agricultural products. The trade of industrial products originating in the territory of both treaty partners is now duty-free. This was the Federal Council's first careful step in its rapprochement towards the EEA. It met with broad support of the people. In 1989, the insurance agreement followed. It guarantees reciprocal freedom of domicile for agencies and branches of insurance companies. Already now, 40% of the premium income of all Swiss insurance companies originate from the EC area. This is more than the premium income generated within Switzerland, which accounts for 36%, and still more than the 25% of premiums generated in all other countries across the world. In 1992, some important decisions were made regarding the relations between Switzerland and the European Union. In May 1992, the Federal Council submitted a formal request asking Brussels to open accession negotiations. It expected EEA accession to meet with approval. The Swiss people had heated discussions about EEA membership. Such membership would have granted Switzerland equal access to the European single market. However, Switzerland would have only had limited clout when developing laws. Federal Council, Parliament, as well as the wide majority of the big parties had expressed their support for Swiss membership of the EEA. But things turned out differently. The verdict of the Swiss people was clearer than expected. 16 of the 23 cantons that voted say no to the EEA. That's 49.7% yes against 50.3% no votes. It was only 23,105 votes that made the final decision. This must have been the closest defeat of a constitutional bill since the end of the Second World War. The vote on December 6, 1992 became a fiasco for the political establishment. However, it laid the foundation for the bilateral path between Switzerland and the EU. A variety of sectoral agreements with the European Union were supposed to build on the existing cooperation and prevent the risk of Switzerland becoming economically isolated. In 1999 saw the conclusion of 7 sectoral agreements, which the Swiss population agreed in an optional referendum. The votes were on the free movement of people, technical trade barriers, public contracts, agriculture, overland transport, air transport, as well as research. They came into effect in 2002. The free movement of people was gradually introduced and fully implemented in 2007. Initially, the European Commission was sceptical about a second round of agreements. The interests of Switzerland and the EU were too different to immediately find common ground for further negotiations. In an effort to find a compromise, Switzerland agreed to enter negotiations on the fight against fraud and the taxation of savings. In return, the EU suggested Switzerland start negotiations on Schengen and Dublin, in other words, on cooperation in the areas of asylum and security. In the end, further treaties were agreed, which, apart from Switzerland joining the Dublin and Schengen agreements, included closer cooperation in resolving fraud, conclusion of the negotiations on agricultural products, as well as agreements on environment, media, education, pension schemes, statistics, and services. In June 2005, the Swiss people voted 54.6% in favour of joining the Schengen and Dublin agreements. The agreements became effective at the end of 2008. They made systematic identity checks between Switzerland and the Schengen states redundant. The cooperation between police and justice authorities was strengthened. The Dublin Rules of Jurisdiction and the fingerprint database Eurodac aim at preventing multiple asylum applications. In September 2005, the Swiss voted in favour of extending the free movement of people to 10 new EU member states with 56% of the votes. In February 2009, 59.6% of the voters agreed to extend it to Bulgaria and Romania. Since January 1, 2017, the free movement of people has also applied to Croatia, which joined the EU in 2013. The Swiss people were given several opportunities to vote on bilateral treaties, and they have always supported them. However, on February 9, 2014, Swiss voters, as well as the majority of cantons, adopted the so-called Mass Immigration Initiative. This put the free movement of people, which is a bilateral treaty, into question. Switzerland decided for a new immigration system. Since then, relations with the EU have been somewhat bumpy. We know that this constitutional text is not compatible with the free movement of people. The free movement of people is one of the 4 fundamental freedoms of the EU. There is now a certain conflict. On behalf of the Swiss people, we will try to reach the best possible result in the negotiations. In December 2016, the Federal Assembly implemented a light version of the initiative, which is subject to giving Swiss residents preferential treatment. This obliges companies to register job vacancies and prioritise Swiss nationals when shortlisting for interviews. The law does not, however, include the maximum figures and contingencies required by the initiative. Switzerland and the EU have laid down the rules for their relations in about 120 bilateral treaties. Concluding new agreements on access to markets depends on finding a consent on institutional questions. Even the Council of the EU adheres to its conclusions on the relations between the EU and Switzerland, which was reached in February 2017, that for further paving the bilateral path, an agreement on the institutional question would be necessary. A new framework agreement is supposed to regulate the interpretation of the agreements on access to markets as well as on judicial dispute settlements. Switzerland and the EU started relevant negotiations in 2014, which are due to be finalised this autumn.